Welcome to the Warning Track Power Hour. I'm Andrew Scaff. He's Mike Werman. Today, we're going to get into the last part of our NFL preseason 2023 preview. We'll go through the win totals for each of the teams that we expect for the season. Before that, we'll get into a little of the end of the preseason, the Chiefs' final game. And we'll kick off today with hopefully a very brief segment because I think both you and I are very fed up with the Kansas City Royals. They dropped their 93rd game of the season tonight. Mike, what is your level of engagement with the team right now? Are you locked in?
I think like most of Kansas City, we're more interested in what happens maybe 5 years down the road if they build a new stadium or not, and what it's going to look like than the current product is on the field. I think maybe you have some interest. Bobby Witt Jr. is very good, so I kind of keep an eye on what he's up to. Maybe check Fermin or a couple of other players and just see how the pitching does if Singer is coming along or something like that. But for the most part,
be pretty decent.
Yeah. Cole Reagan's tonight was really good.
Last several appearances he's made have been quite good.
Yeah, so
he's one of the only pitchers that's doing anything. I think Singer's going to miss his next start with like arm fatigue too. So that's not a great sign.
No,
the one guy that had been good is or consistently okay, at least anyway.
Well, maybe Reagan's will hurt his arm too, just to make it even better. But Reagan's has been really good. He's been like lights out no runs allowed the last two appearances. He had seven shutout innings tonight. The Royals kind of blew it at the end with their bullpen and maybe some odd decision making by Matt Quatrero, which isn't really anything new. So I don't know. It's just one of those things where the Royals are losing, and maybe I thought they wouldn't be very good this year, but I didn't realize they would be this awful, like historically awful. Like they're just lucky that the A's are around so that the Royals aren't the worst team.
Although head to head, the A's were much better than the Royals.
They 4 games out of 6 the A's won. Yeah. But I guess you could say, unfortunately, even in the current like the way the draft is set up, even if the Royals were the worst, it doesn't pay to be the worst anymore because you don't automatically get the number 1 draft pick. So the Royals, I think, are just going to end up somewhere between the 1st and the 3rd draft pick.
No, not necessarily. It's just the 3 worst teams have the same odds
of getting the 1st.
And I think you can't go below 6th or something like that.
Okay, so it doesn't even matter. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it matters. I think if you're in the bottom 3, I don't think you're guaranteed a top 3, selection. So it's not great. I mean, what is the 3rd worst team in the league? How far away?
It was the Rockies at one point. The Cardinals were approaching it.
The Royals are 9 games behind Colorado in the standings. And Colorado is, it looks like 7 games, 6.5 back of St. Louis. So the Royals could be 15 games better and be in the exact same draft position.
Yeah.
With no advantage. So there's really no point to losing this many games for whatever reason they think they're losing. They almost have to be losing nearly on purpose with the decision making that we've seen from the organization.
I don't know if it's that bad, but they just don't have they just aren't any good, and their players, even if they play well, somehow things still get bungled. And I think it's just the faster this season can come to an end, the better. So just play the games out, and hopefully the Royals don't lose more than 110, though it seems likely they might at this point lose 110 plus, but the 41 and 93, so they have 130 4 games played, so they have 28 games.
They'd be
left.
on pace for 49.5 wins, 49.6 wins. Can you win a partial game? So it's 49 wins, is it not?
Yeah, so let's say they go 49, they'll be 49 and 113
Yeah,
is their pace.
that's their
So
yeah, that's their pace. But that's the season long pace. I think recently they've only been winning like 1 out of every 6 or 7
yeah,
games.
they had a great winning streak like 3 weeks ago, and then they've been really bad since. They're 1-9 in the last 10. They've lost 5 in a row. They are still technically third in run differential somehow. They're minus 189, whereas the Rockies are minus 191 to be second worst. So and the A's are way down at minus 309. So like the Royals, I don't know. They're not a good team. They're luckily maybe not the worst team, but the worst
It doesn't
team is
matter.
not even going to be in the same city probably in a cup. When do you know when the A's are leaving for Vegas? Is it
Well, so the latest was that the stadium wouldn't be ready until 2027, 2028 maybe. So they're talking about an interim location. They've talked about them playing um in another town for because their lease is up very soon here. So they're talking about maybe 2 or 3 years playing maybe in San Francisco even. Uh I just there was just an article about it just a couple of days ago. That they may play at an alternate site. I guess they floated a few different sites for um, you know, the interim between when the new stadium would open and when their lease is up. Because I think the lease ends maybe after next season or maybe even after this season. So they may have to play several years into some alternate.
yeah, maybe they play in I don't know where they play. Would they what I guess
Was it? I think
UNLV
it was
probably has a
at
baseball state. I was just like what or would they play someplace like temporary, like I don't know, Reno or someplace. I don't know where they would go, but yeah, I'm just reading right now. Yeah, it says like 2028 is when the stadium's gonna be. That's like they're no farther along than the Royals are with their stadium. They haven't even bought the land. They don't even have they haven't even broke ground yet, haven't even broken ground yet in Kansas City. They don't even know where it's gonna be. So
yeah.
seems like the A's are not much in much better position. Their stadium is going to be designed by another Kansas City firm. It looks like Schrock Kansas City Architecture. Have you heard of them?
No, I don't know that one.
Probably some guy who was at Populous or HOK.
Or HOK that became Populous. I know
Yeah.
HOK Sport is back again.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, so it's a separate entity though. And then there's at least one other sports stadium architect firm.
There was Ellerby Beckett for a
Yep.
while.
Yep. I think that's still around.
There were like 3 of them. There was something else too. Uh, but yeah, it was part of HOK, and then I guess HOK is back. They oh
Yeah, so
wait,
HOK Sport became Populous, I believe.
okay, so it says the company is one of several Kansas City-based sports design firms that trace their roots to Kivett and Myers, who designed the Truman Sports Complex. And other firms with sports design presence in Kansas City that trace their roots back to Kivett include Elby Beckett and HNTB Corp.
HNTB's, yeah, that's another big one too.
And then 360 Architecture is also based in Kansas City.
Yeah.
So HNTB did Levi's
Yeah.
Stadium and Allegiant Stadium, which is where the Raiders play. And then 360 Architecture was bought by HOK, and they do ballparks. And they did some other. They did MetLife Stadium and was part of the downtown design team that did the Sprint Center. That was like like a group effort, I think, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know what. Yeah, so I guess, but anyway, yeah, I don't know. The Royals are bad, and it doesn't look like they are making any real improvements. They have a couple of good players, but I don't. I'm not. I'm just waiting for. I'm just waiting for the season to end, and I'm glad that football season is approaching because it's at least something that seems like the Chiefs, even if they don't win the Super Bowl, they're still going to at least be competitive, and it's a something that I don't know. It's much less numbing, I think, the daily grind of a losing baseball team than having even a losing football team. At least it's the games are interesting, even once if it's just once a week, and you can at least I don't know. I'd rather have a losing football team than a losing baseball team, probably, and maybe it would rather have a winning football team. I don't know. Winning either one is fun, but I
No.
think I don't know. It seems like football gets over more quickly than baseball does, and maybe that's part of it. And you can kind of already start to think about the draft. We can improve next year, or if new coach comes in, the team can be a lot better. But in baseball, things are much slower to happen. Usually, it's a slower improvement. You don't see it right away, and it's a multi-year
Yeah.
process.
Well, and the individual seasons are more of a grind.
Yeah, it's kind of depressing even just to talk about the Royals. And so let's move on to something a little happier, even if they are not going to be repeating as Super Bowl champions. They might, it's possible, but we should talk about the Chiefs a little bit and then segue into our general NFL preview, the conclusion of our NFL preview. Is there anything that you like? So did you watch? I was unable to watch the Chiefs' final preseason game. You watched it, Dr. Scaff. Was there anything that caught your eye in that game?
Yeah, I thought at least early on, well, so Mahomes did not play at all in the game, but they actually gave Shane Buechele first team reps then, which I thought was a little surprising. That you think typically they would have assumed that Gabbert was the number 2 guy, but Buechele got the number 2 snaps and did not have a great appearance. Threw a couple of interceptions early.
Yeah, pick six, and then like
Immediately was run
a
back
deep
for a
return by
touchdown.
the other on the other one. Yeah,
And yeah, so the Chiefs were, dug, themselves into a deep hole with starters minus Mahomes plus Buechele. Yeah, it was 22-3, I think, at the end of the first quarter. But then the Chiefs were pretty decent from then on.
they
What?
won that game 33-32, right?
Yeah, on the last second field goal miss from Cleveland, which I guess led them to actually signing a new kicker. Then after
Yeah,
that,
they traded for San Diego's kicker, not San Diego, the Los Angeles Chargers.
mm.
Hopkins, I think, went to the Browns, and
Right.
now, yeah, and also I think that game ended up costing Shane Buechele perhaps his roster spot on the Chiefs. I think everybody, at least most people in Kansas City, seemed to think that the Chiefs were going to keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster when they went down to 53 for the regular season, especially given the fact that there's the new rule now that the third quarterback can be used in a game, can be part of a team's on the field roster that doesn't count against the 47 to 48 sized roster, depending on how many players are used in different positions. But yeah, I think so that maybe that cost Buechele, although Gabbert also threw a pick six in the game against Cleveland. So, but on a happier note, at least for me, is if I had bet on that game, I was correct again on my preseason bets. I had predicted the Chiefs to cover the spread. I predicted actually the Chiefs to win outright, and I predicted the game to go over. I think it was 42 or 43, something like that was the over under. It wasn't very high, and it went way over. So I was in my over unders.
And Cleveland was actually favored in the game.
Yeah,
Somehow.
Cleveland was favored by 3.5, I think. So
6.5, I think, is the line I saw.
it went up to 6.5. Okay, I
Yeah.
know the Chiefs are favored for 6.5.
It must have been because Mahomes was
Mahomes was out.
not planning on playing it.
Yeah. So anyway, I thought maybe Mahomes would play a series when I made my bet, but I still didn't expect him to play very much at all. So, but I am 8 out of 9 in my preseason over under money line bets and spread picks for the Chiefs in the preseason. So I hope that will continue into the regular season. My spectacular betting prowess, although I'm sure it won't. But it's and also our decision to make a blanket over bet on all of the preseason games final scores, because they were all really low artificially. Most of the games hovered under 40 points or were just hovering around 40 points. So I figured if it's that low, usually NFL games are higher scoring than that, especially when I think teams are trying to prove themselves. Players on teams are trying to prove themselves to make roster spots and things like that. So I think sometimes, even though you think, oh, it's worse players playing, they aren't going to score as many points. Sometimes they end up scoring just as many or more points. That's what the Chiefs have done. So I think what was the over under? How many games went over versus under last week?
Blanket over under over was 10-6. 9-7 the week before, and 11 or 10-5-1 in week 1. So combined, if you would have done the $1,600 bet every week, you would have made $1,100 across the preseason, which is not bad on $1,600. That's almost a 70% return.
Yeah, well, I guess technically you'd bet $1,600 each of those weeks, and I guess
but you get that money back, then you use that same money.
That's true.
Time, right? So you're not losing any of that. So.
I'm not losing all of that money. That's true.
Yeah. So
it would be I think we've shown that gambling is the way forward to managing money wisely, especially gambling on NFL preseason football. That's the way to go. If you're really a sharp bettor like the two of us, we will maybe we should just do preseason sports wagering from here on out and not even worry about the regular season. Let the chumps bet the real games, and we'll clean up in the preseason.
I did find our totals for last year, and they were very even is what they were. You ended 27-27 on the regular season bets, and I was 27, 26-1.
Okay, so we were about 500. So we would just lose a slight amount because of if we had bet in real life because of the juice.
The juice, yes.
And I guess that's how they get you, because we're I think even if we had flipped a coin at least would not have done better than us, at least in theory, So I feel pretty good. We will talk about our futures picks for the team's wins and losses coming up in a little bit. But are there any other any other comments you want to make about the Chiefs preseason performance?
No, but I think it really leads in nicely to what the final roster choices were then. Yeah. Did anything surprise you about the Chiefs final cuts and moves on the last day?
Yeah, there are several things that that surprised me. Again, we're talking mainly about the body. There's a 53-man roster that the teams can have, and we're talking really about the bottom 5 spots on that roster. So these are probably people that are not really even expected to contribute much if they do play. But I was surprised. Maybe the biggest surprise.
But it's like 30 guys competing for like 5 spots.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of training camp battles. You kind of end up having your favorites and things like that. Maybe the biggest surprise was that the Chiefs ended up cutting Shane Buechele as their third. It seemed like they were going to go with 3 quarterbacks. They went with 3 quarterbacks last season and most of the season before with Buechele as the third. And it seemed like maybe until the last game, Buechele was playing just as well, or maybe even slightly better than Blaine Gabbert was, and was perhaps in line for that second position. But then he ended up getting nothing. He ended up getting. I guess the Chiefs are hoping that he'll be a possible practice squad addition, but
Yeah, clear whatever waivers he has to go through, and
Mhm.
they
And
may
Chris
find.
Oladokun or Oladokun, however his name is pronounced, we've gotten mixed reports here lately at One Track Power Hour. He was dropped as well, so the Chiefs only have two quarterbacks, Gabbert and of course Patrick Mahomes, on their final roster. So that was one surprise. There were a couple other ones. Do you have any? What was a big surprise for you?
Well, probably the outside of the two quarterbacks, the two running backs, I think that were cut then too, with generic Prince and um
Well,
P Ryan. Yeah.
Michael Pirine, yeah, Samaje Pirine's cousin. They weren't brothers, but Samaje I think is going to be on the Broncos this year, filling in for Javonte Williams if he's not quite healthy at the beginning of the season, coming off an ACL injury. But for the Chiefs, yeah, it seemed like at the very beginning of camp, Deneric Prince was in line to make the roster, to be kind of a Pacheco 2.0, because he was even unlike Pacheco, who was drafted in the 7th round. Prince was undrafted, and he surprised people in camp, ran very well, was also seen to be maybe the number one kick returner for the Chiefs. Dave Tobe, the special teams coordinator, I think had compared him to Niall Davis, who maybe for Chiefs fans from a few years ago might remember him. That's maybe not the best comparison as a running back, but as far as a returner, he was really, really good. He never quite worked out at running back. He was one of, I guess it's 10 years ago now that he was drafted. He was one of the 2 third-round draft picks I think the Chiefs had in 2013. One was Travis Kelce, and the other one was Niall Davis. Kelce ended up turning out much better, but I remember when Davis, when he played for Arkansas, was a good player, but he didn't quite cut it at the NFL level, other than in special teams. He had a touchdown return in the playoffs against Houston. That was a big return, but they thought Prince might be like that. But then Michael Pirine, really, he was picked up off of the Bengals roster towards the very end of last year. That was when Chris Lamons was picked up by the Bengals off the Chiefs practice squad. It seemed like the Chiefs picked Pirine off of the Bengals practice squad just to kind of mess with them as the AFC Championship game was approaching. But Pirine, it seemed like, was running the best of any of the running backs. But it looks like the Chiefs going in will just have 3 running backs on the roster. Pacheco is probably the first one. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who a lot of fans are not really happy about. He's been sort of underwhelming as a first-round pick. He was the 5th-year player option was not exercised on him. This is his 4th year, so he's going to be out of a job likely with the Chiefs next year unless he comes back on a very reduced rate. And then Jerick McKinnon, the Chiefs brought back as their third down passing specialist. And I guess what maybe sunk Prince was maybe lack of pass protecting ability on Mahomes. I think that's a big deal for the Chiefs for their running back positions. And I guess they only wanted to keep 3 running backs, so Pirine didn't make it either. So I thought that was a bit of a surprise as well.
When they have to cover at least one position with a holdout and then an injury, or then a suspension on defense, so they may have been forced to keep maybe 2 extra players that they wouldn't necessarily have on cut down day until they can make the technical move to put them on whichever list they have to be put on to bring up another guy on the roster space.
So I think the Chiefs are hoping both of those guys probably make on the practice squad. I was a little surprised as well. Some of the cuts in the defensive line, Danny Shelton was cut, but the Chiefs ended up making a trade with the Raiders to get defensive nose tackle Neil Farrell, who had played at LSU along with Clyde Edwards-Helaire when they won the national championship, and he was I think a 4th round pick of the Raiders last year or 2 years ago, and the Chiefs traded a 6th round pick to get him, and so I guess he seems to be a stopgap in case Jones doesn't come back, or maybe just also to add kind of run stopping ability in the middle of the line, which I think the Chiefs want. that was one of two trades the Chiefs made on Tuesday. The other one was trading Emir Smith-Marset to the Panthers. Smith-Marset was another one of these camp darlings who had played very well in the preseason games, but he did not end up on the Chiefs roster, but instead has been traded to the Panthers, where it seems like he will make the team there. And the Chiefs will get the Panthers 2025 7th round pick and give the Panthers the Chiefs 2025 7th round pick. So presumably the Chiefs will have a better record than the Panthers and be able to move up in the 7th round, I guess.
It's really the Chiefs are actually betting that Carolina will still not be good. Not
Yeah.
this year, but next year. They're still going to be bad next season.
Yeah, I was surprised they waited till they did a 2025 pick, but maybe it's conditional. Maybe it's based on playing time that can really only be accrued over 2 years. We didn't really get the conditions. But yeah, so the Chiefs, they ended up keeping 7 wide receivers, which was more than normal because Justin Ross, the former Clemson standout who had injuries and other issues that had plagued him, maybe birth defect kind of issues with his spine and things like that affected him, but he ended up making the roster as the 7th wide receiver. I guess we don't know the number ranking of the wide receiver, but then there being 7 wide receivers, and Justin Ross was one of them. And so that's I think a lot of people were happy for Justin Ross. So that's the Chiefs roster ended up being a little bit strange, I think. Matt Bushman, a tight end, ended up making it. I thought he's been pretty good. They kept Blake Bell over him. I guess maybe they think if the Chiefs need a third emergency quarterback, Blake Bell can play quarterback because he played quarterback at Oklahoma.
Maybe that's
and maybe he's their third quarterback. He does kind of bad quarterback sneaks lately. It seems like they don't ever make it when he does it, but I don't know how much that's Bell's fault versus just boring kind of short yardage play calling that the Chiefs have been running lately. But yeah, so it's are you did you find these Chiefs roster decisions that did they confuse you? Were you are you down a little bit on the Chiefs because of maybe what they decided, or is this like we're really arguing, we're splitting hairs here, and it doesn't really matter what?
I think he summed it up best when we came up with that, saying that this was really the fight for like the last 5 spots. And so it's really hard to be that disappointed about a team that just won the Super Bowl. So I think everybody kind of had their own sort of personal favorites that they had from the preseason. And I was really high on Amir Smith-Marset after watching him the last several weeks anyway. The last 2 weeks anyway, he was great and had almost 200 yards receiving in this last 2 games. And they had a couple that I think were even called back that he had even more yardage. So it's disappointing that he wasn't able to make the roster, but I hope that he makes an impact, at least somewhat of an impact on Carolina, I guess then. But good for him if he does.
Yeah, you hope he gets a good spot, because he had been a 5th round, I think, draft pick by Minnesota a couple of years ago and hadn't really latched on anywhere, and so maybe this is it just took him a couple of years to develop, and maybe it's a good sign that the Chiefs have a lot of depth. They don't necessarily have a lot of kind of proven talent. They have a lot of potential, I think. The only real veteran that's had a decent amount of success is probably Marcus Valdes-Scantling. Even the Chiefs' other veterans are like, it's Kadarius Toney, who is still more potential than he is. He's more of a potential impact player than he has been an actual proven player, although he showed what he could maybe do in the Super Bowl when he had the big punt return and the touchdown. But Sky Moore should be improved from last year. Rashee Rice, the rookie 2nd round pick. I guess we have Justin Watson, who I think a lot of players or Chiefs fans thought, well, why do we have Watson back? He wasn't that great last year. He's a little older. Maybe he's just keeping somebody like Ross or somebody like Smith-Marset from making the team. Well, it seems like I don't know. It seems like Mahomes likes Justin Watson quite a bit. He goes to him a lot. Maybe Watson is maybe a slightly better version of Garrett Dieter, who was on the roster, or
Yeah,
on the fringes of the roster for a while
yeah.
because he
He
was
made a couple
Mahomes' friend.
appearances.
You want to keep Mahomes happy, so
Yeah, why
maybe
not?
that's what it is. I think that's
But,
all.
but I don't think the Chiefs made the most surprising moves um,
No,
of the NFL on cut down day anyway. Anybody stand out to you as a surprising
yeah.
set of cuts like
I
this?
think on cut down day
Doing?
itself, probably the most surprising team was the New England Patriots. And we were talking about, well, we were a little bit confused why the Chiefs dropped their third quarterback, Shane Buechele, and also their fourth quarterback, Chris Oladokun, why they got rid of them. But the Patriots dropped, when we did our season preview a couple of weeks ago for the AFC, I guess maybe just last week now for the AFC,
Last week, yeah.
the Patriots had 4 quarterbacks on their roster. Michael McCorkle, Mac Jones, and then Bailey Zappi, Trace McSorley, and also Malik Cunningham. And as of Tuesday, only McCorkle, Mac Jones remains on the roster. So they don't. So the Patriots don't even have a backup quarterback in place.
Mm-hmm.
What were the Patriots thinking? What are they thinking? Why do they only have one quarterback on their roster? Are they trying to get Carson Wentz? That there was a rumor a couple of days ago that the Chiefs might want Wentz. Maybe you could say, well, maybe that's why I got rid of Buechele. But you might think, well, they would have gotten rid of Gabbert instead of Buechele if they wanted Wentz.
That's what I would think. Yeah.
But
I mean, you think maybe one of the two, Oladokun or Buechele passes through waivers and they can re-sign them, put them on the practice squad, and that's to be a third quarterback. Maybe New England's doing the same thing, but with 3
maybe New
guys.
England is going to pick up Shane Buechele.
Maybe they like Shane Buechele.
Maybe, but I was thinking that New England was maybe going to get rid of Zappi simply because they didn't want to challenge Mac Jones too much. I think maybe Mac Jones's ego was bruised having people in New England want Zappi last year more than they wanted Mac Jones. Zappi played better on the whole, better than Jones did last year. I don't think there's really a lot of differences physically between the two. Zappi, I think, didn't have a very good camp, but I think that's also because the Patriots want so much, not necessarily to have the best quarterback succeed, but wanted to have Mac Jones succeed this year. And they really went out of their way to make things easier on Jones particularly.
Well, they did break sort of their tradition by trading up to get him to begin with, which is not something that they've been doing. They usually find these value guys late in the draft rather than spend capital to move up and get somebody they want. They thought they
they got it 2 years ago. Yeah, they got him in the 15th overall pick 2 years ago. They brought his old offensive coordinator and from Alabama and an old offensive coordinator in New England before he became the Texans coach, and Bill O'Brien, famously with the interesting chin dimple. It's like a thumbtack in his chin, and took it out. But yeah, so they brought him back, and he was a Mac Jones supporter. So I guess that's what they're doing. I don't know. I would have guessed they would have kept Cunningham around.
Yeah.
Because if you think, well, Zappi is too much like Jones, we don't want to confuse the issue. Although I think Zappi played well enough last year to deserve a chance at the starting job, quite frankly. But maybe that means that the Patriots are looking for an upgrade. Also, the backups. Maybe my assessment of them trying to help Mac Jones succeed isn't really what was going on. Maybe they do want somebody who can be maybe a veteran.
It depends on who they pick up, I guess.
Yeah, Colt McCoy also was made available. So it seems like
Brett
Rippon, yeah. It seems like the Cardinals especially are maybe trying to tank this season because they got rid of their only really experienced good quarterback. And also got rid of David Blau and a couple of other players, and they brought in Joshua Dobbs, who was the Cleveland Browns kind of odd man out there. But so it seems like Dobbs is probably going to play as the starter. It seems like, unless they bring in, was it Clayton Tune, who was the 5th round draft pick out of Houston this year. Is he going to start? Like, they're waiting for Kyler Murray maybe to come back, but who knows when that's going to be? And maybe they're just trying to play.
It can't be until at least week 5. We already know that
because physically unable to perform this.
So yeah, so he's out for at least the first 4 weeks of the season. So they're stuck with using either Tune, Dobbs, or some combination of the two, because that's all they have now, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, they got rid of Driscoll, Blau, and Murray's not going to play. So like, it seems like maybe they're just trying to, because they traded some players away recently to other teams that were pretty good for them. So like, maybe they're just trying to get the Caleb Williams and maybe figure out, well, we can maybe trade Kyler Murray to some team next year. We'll worry about that when it happens. I think the Cardinals have both the Texans' first round pick and their own first round pick, so it's a good chance that at least if the Texans, if the Cardinals aren't the worst team in the NFL, the Texans might be. So there's a pretty good chance of having the number 1 overall pick. And it seems like right now the consensus pick is Caleb Williams. Although a few years ago we thought the consensus number 1 pick was going to be Tua Tagovailoa, when we thought maybe the Dolphins were trying to tank for Tua, but it ended up being Joe Burrow. So maybe there will be a different consensus number 1 pick by the end of the college football season. But
Miami ended up with him anyway, so it didn't.
Yeah, Miami got him anyway. Yeah, even though Brian Flores was not was supposedly fired because he did not intentionally lose football games.
Didn't lose enough. Yes.
Yeah.
But so maybe because you mentioned the Arizona potentially tanking to get a new quarterback, do you think that they will attempt to trade Kyler Murray and would get more than a 4th round pick for Kyler Murray, which was apparently the going rate for high draft picks that haven't panned out as much as expected? What we saw with San Francisco this week then too.
Yeah, Trey Lance got traded. He was going to be the 3rd quarterback maybe in San Francisco. They ended up taking Brandon Allen as the 3rd quarterback because Lance got traded to Dallas, and Will Greer ended up being the odd man out there. Did you see that Greer had like this amazing game that he played in preseason right after maybe he knew that Lance was coming. He had a fantastic I guess a fantastic game, and had like I'm gonna look it up real quick.
Maybe Arizona or New England will go after him then, because Greer's available now too. Is that right?
Yeah, Greer was 29 of 35, 305 yards and 4 touchdowns rushing and passing. So 29 of 30 in his final preseason game.
That's not bad.
Yeah,
that should earn a spot on somebody's roster.
Yeah, he should maybe that's who New England wants. Maybe that's so like maybe that's why Buechele was let go, because you have Zappy, you have Colt McCoy who was let go by the Cardinals, you have Will Greer, you have some bigger names now that ended up getting cut, but at the 53-man deadline. So maybe they think, we can sneak these guys into. I think at least what we have read was that the Patriots also thought they could sneak Zappy into the practice squad, and maybe also Cunningham. But yeah, I don't.
One or both that may be aiming for. Yeah, but you'd still think you'd want one of them on the main roster. Somebody, one of them.
Yeah, you need to have at least 2. It seems like, because the 3rd quarterback is, only used in emergency, and also has to be on the 53-man roster to use the 3rd quarterback. So I don't know who the Patriots have. Maybe that was a sort of, ex-college quarterback that's become a NFL position player. But yeah, it's puzzling. So you have to think that the Patriots will make some kind of maybe even by the time this airs, the games don't start until the week after
Another week.
next. So it's or next weekend, week after next weekend. I guess next week we'll have the Chiefs game. They open on Thursday night, the 7th of September, I think. And
Yeah, Thursday is the 7th. Yeah. So
um,
so yes, our next episode will be our season first game picks. Then will be next week for us.
I know everybody's gonna be excited to tune in for that. Sure. Any other news around the league? We have two big holdouts, at least still. We have Joey Bosa holding out in San Francisco and Chris Jones holding out in Kansas City. I actually read an article somewhere that they thought the Chiefs should trade Jones for Bosa, and maybe that would help both teams, and maybe
both would be happy then too.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Or is it Nick? Was it Nick Bosa? I mean, not Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa.
Yeah.
I get Nick and Joey confused. Nick plays for San Francisco. Joey plays for the Chargers.
Yeah. You would not expect the Chiefs and Chargers to make a trade. That would be a little surprising.
Yeah, no. And so Nick Bosa,
unless one of them knew that something was wrong with one of the guys that they were trying to
I think both of them want about the same amount of money. I guess it makes a little more sense for Nick to pay Nick Bosa because he is younger, and it's maybe makes a little more sense for him to hold out because he's not making as much money as Chris Jones is. Chris Jones is still making $20 million this year. So, he wants more, but I don't know. Maybe it's just better for him to play out this year and get a new contract. If he doesn't think the Chiefs are going to get it, give it to somebody else, get from somebody else, and maybe holding out might also hurt his offers from other teams next year if they think, well, this guy's a malcontent. He's going to hold out when he's not satisfied with his contract or something.
Maybe like every year.
Yeah. So I hope Jones comes back before the season starts, but that's my biggest worry for the Chiefs. It's the possible lack of Chris Jones early. I guess
there was a report this last week that he was maybe willing to hold out until through like the first 8 weeks of the season.
I saw that. Yeah.
I don't know how much truth there is to that, but that's what was reported.
I also heard a rumor that Chris Jones' agent was eating at not Oklahoma Joe's Kansas City barbecue recently, and maybe that was a sign that things were negotiations were progressing or something like that, but it's hard to say.
His agent is in Kansas City. That's a good sign, I guess. Yeah. Any other interesting tidbits from around the NFL before we move on?
I think at this point, we usually talk a lot about those, like we've mentioned kind of before. We talk a lot about those like roster cut downs and pickups and things like that. And for the most part, those don't usually turn out to be that big a deal because those are the lower people on the roster. Maybe 5 or 10 years ago, it was the Chiefs picking up some of those cast-offs from other teams and actually inserting them into the starting lineup. Chiefs did that, had like 5 or 6 players maybe in 2013 or 14 that they ended up putting in the lineup. But the Chiefs now are not on the top of the waiver wire anymore, so they're not going to get the picks like that. But the trades were interesting, I think, and maybe there will be more, maybe there still will be more dealing and wheeling and dealing and wheeling in the next few days.
I think the rosters will make a lot more sense when the practice squads get finalized, and I assume New England will have at least 3 quarterbacks somewhere in the stack, whether or not they're on the full roster or not. But
yeah, well, you'd think they would at least 2 on the regular roster because you just need to have a backup quarterback. It seems like just in case. But
you for at least it works for at least a couple weeks to elevate someone from the practice squad to the active roster.
Yeah, you can do that. I think
that for a few weeks before you have to like make a decision about bringing them on the roster or not. So
yeah, I think there are 3. You can do it 3 times for a practice squad person, but then if you do it again, that person has to be on the 53,
the permanent roster.
Permanent roster, yeah. But it's a tricky game to play at that level. And so like this is where the GMs and the executive staffs kind of can separate themselves from one another, is how they manage those kind of roster edges, and how to deal with the salary cap and things like that, when payment is weekly rather than yearly, and you have to prorate things, and what is that? It's a complicated system that the NFL has chosen to go with,
Yeah, I
simply
think
to save a little bit of money, because some of the teams are cheaper than others, and we all want to appear like we're doing the same thing. All of our boats must row in the same direction, as they said in Godfather Part 3.
yes.
So speaking of Godfather Part 3, this will be our third and final installment of our NFL preview. It's going to be a little shorter, probably, we think, than our two previous sessions when we previewed the quarterbacks for the NFC and then the AFC. Now we're going to kind of predict the overall performance, the final regular season records of each of these NFL teams, and also say how they will come, how these final records will play out when it comes to the sort of NFL future betting that you could do for the season. Most of the sports books and websites have listings for each team saying how many wins will this team have in the regular season, will it be over a certain number or under that number, and we've done overs or unders for each of these 32 teams. And do we want to get into that?
Yeah, and so I think we independently came to our numbers, so that maybe it'd be interesting for us to maybe talk about what methodology we each used to go about picking the over under on these. I think we had similar strategies, because we didn't talk about this before. We decided we were going to do over unders on each team's win totals, but we didn't say how we were going to do it. How did you go about deciding if you were going to go over under on anybody's win total, Mike?
I decided I was going to look at every game that each team played over the course of the season, and I tried to decide, well, is this team likely to win or lose that game? And I came out with a winner or loser of all of the games of the 18 weeks of the NFL season. So each team plays 17 games. So each team's 17 games, and I picked, was there going to be a win or a loss? I used a grid. If you are listening on the podcast, you can't see this grid, but if you're watching on the YouTube channel, you can see the grid, and I made X's and O's, and I kind of had some mistakes here and there, but I had a scheduled grid of each of the teams, and I went through week by week, team by team, and thought, is this a win? Is this a loss? Is this a win? This is a loss? And so I came up with my final numbers based on that grid. I didn't look at the over unders until I finished that grid, and then I just kind of found out, well, this is where I stand. I ended up picking over. I ended up picking under, and that's how I did it. I didn't want to look at the over under really until I did the grid. How did you end up doing yours?
So you literally picked out every single game for the whole season. That was your
yes. If as we go along each week, I'm probably not going to keep that in mind, but I figured, well, I think at least right now, I don't know if I'll get all the games right, but it gave me a sense of
you're gonna get them all right.
It gave me a sense of how well these teams are going to do. So like, I ended up picking the Chiefs to win, I think, 14 games and losing 3, but I don't necessarily know the Chiefs are going to lose the 3 games that I thought they lose or win, but I figured, that kind of put them in a certain, in relation to the other team. So I didn't think of each team in a vacuum that way, because now I can say, well, they're going to be an equal number of wins and an equal number of losses in the NFL this year, and I want to be able to allocate them reasonably well, and that's how I decided to do it.
Yeah. So that is the brute force. But you have an actual accurate number then for how many wins. So you have the exact number of wins that are possible.
I did. I ended up kind of messing it up. I think I had two
Yeah.
teams win one game at one point, but I think I ended up going back and figuring it out.
Maybe you're off by one somewhere. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah.
So I didn't quite go the full brute force. It was a sort of a hybrid version of what you did. I actually did pull up each team's schedule and then kind of like felt through it in segments. Like, oh, like this is a very tough stretch. They'll probably only win one of these 3 games. This one's pretty easy. They should win like 3 of these 5. This section's like really hard again. They're only going to win one out of those 4. So I came up with a win total for each team that way. But my win totals will not be accurate for the whole league then. So like they may not be possible the way that I learned out anyway, but it's good enough for me to estimate an over under number. So I do have a win loss total for each team, as do you, which we didn't say we were necessarily going to do, but that is how we both sort of came up with it. Should we?
Yeah, why don't you want to go through it the way we did the quarterbacks? Start with the NFC and then do the AFC, and then but go from west, south, north, east, the kind of reverse geographical order from maybe we would do otherwise.
From how the U.S. was founded.
Yeah.
From east to west, we'll go backwards.
Yes, and we'll also do south before north rather than north before south, like we tend to. Maybe it's because of our pro-Confederate leanings here on the Orange
It must be.
No, we don't have pro-Confederate leanings on the Orange Power. We were staunchly Union in the Civil War.
Strongly anti-Confederate.
Yeah. But in the NFL, the South is going first.
Yes.
At least before the North, but the West is going. West, I guess, is best. So we'll start with the NFC West. Do you want to lay out your divisional picks?
Sure.
Or do you want to do it alphabetically, or do you want to do it in the order that you think the teams will finish?
I can do it either way. How about I'll put them in order by win totals. Is that
okay?
Fair.
Sounds good.
I had San Francisco winning division, 12 wins, 12-5. Then Rams second, 8-9, and I have Seattle and Arizona 6-11 both.
Okay. And I have Seattle. I mean, I have San Francisco winning as well. I have them at 10-7. I have Seattle and the Rams both at 8-9, each at 8-9, and then I have Arizona at 3-14. So the over unders that we ended up going with were provided by the FanDuel website.
Mm-hmm.
The San Francisco over under was 10.5. You said 12 wins, so you're over.
I'll be over. You'll be under.
10 wins, so I'm under.
We're both over on Rams.
Yeah, Rams was over 6.5. I have the Rams actually winning 8 games.
So did I.
And you had them winning 8 games. Seattle was 8.5. And I think we're both under with Seattle. I had Seattle winning 8 games, going 8-9. You had Seattle winning only 6.
Yep.
So you obviously thought Seattle maybe was a flash in the pan last year. Geno Smith maybe is not the answer at quarterback that he seemed to be.
Yeah. Or he may be fine, but the team just isn't going to be as strong this year, is my prediction.
And then Arizona was 4.5. And so you were over on Arizona.
I'm over on Arizona. You're under on Arizona.
I'm under. I'm way under in Arizona. They were 3 and 4. I guess I'm only 1.5 under, but I was thinking
pretty far. When it's only 4.5.
Yeah. I think now, especially, people are going to go on the under for that. So, and who knows how much Kyler Murray is going to play. I'm sure when Murray plays, the team will be better, but I think the Cardinals are not going to be a very good team.
Doesn't look to be that good. But I still had him over though, so I don't know. That may not be a good sign then. But we have some differences though.
Yeah, it's good.
Two differences already. NFC South, maybe the worst division in the NFL.
Yes.
my division winner, I have with only 7 wins, New Orleans Saints. And then I have Carolina and Tampa at 5 wins each. Atlanta with only 3.
Okay.
So
you had basically
the divisions beating each other up and then not winning basically any games.
we had similar ideas. I think we each think the NFC South is the worst division, and I think basically we got the same order as well. I had New Orleans winning. I have them actually finishing 10-7 because I think they're clearly head and shoulders better than any of the other South teams. So I think they'll go 5-1, maybe even 6-0. I can't remember how I did it in their division. I think I have them at 5-1. I think I have them only losing at Tampa Bay. So I had them winning the other one. So I had New Orleans at 5-1 the division. So I had them at 10-7. I had Carolina in second at 6-11, and I had Tampa and Atlanta each at 5-12. I didn't sort the tiebreakers there. I ended up listing Tampa ahead of Atlanta, but I don't know if that's going to end up happening. But 5-12 for Tampa Bay and Atlanta, and I think so this ended up with a number of different results for us. New Orleans was actually over under 9.5.
Yeah, just the one is flipped for us. It's the Saints.
So I had New Orleans over. You had New Orleans under.
Yep.
Carolina was listed at 7.5 wins. Again, I see it hard to. I don't see Carolina being a 7-10 or a 8-9 team. I have them at 6-11, which I thought was pretty generous for me. But that's mainly because they play Tampa and Atlanta, so they can win in those games. So I had them at 6-11, and then Tampa, I had under 6.5. You had under 6.5.
We had both of us had them 5.
At 5, and then Atlanta for some reason was 8.5 was the over under, and I don't think either of us can see Atlanta anywhere near 500. They have by far I think the most unproven quarterback, or at least maybe the least pedigreed quarterback, Desmond Ridder, and they don't seem to have a really solid backup either. So yeah, I struggle to see how Atlanta will win.
So even if you and I added our win total expectations together, it would still be under for us.
Yeah, 8. Yeah.
NFC North is a little more competitive. I actually have Detroit winning the division at 11-6, and I have Minnesota 9-8, Bears at 8-9, Packers at only 4-13.
Here we were almost exactly the same. We were only off by one game on the record, so we had the same order as well. I had Detroit 11-6, Minnesota 9-8, Chicago 8-9. I had Green Bay at 5-12 rather than 4-13.
Oh, really?
I'm pretty down.
That was really close.
That was pretty close. I'm pretty down on Green Bay as well, but I think simply because there are lots of bad teams in the NFC, that maybe they can scrounge 5 victories. And I think Lambeau Field is still a home field advantage in the winter time, so I think maybe they could claw a victory or two late that they might not get otherwise. I had Green Bay winning a couple games at home they play the NFC South as well, so I thought maybe they could win a couple of those games late against the NFC South. So 5-12. And so Detroit's over under was 9.5, and so we both went.
Sports books weren't super impressed with this division.
No, they were all bunched together, which I thought was interesting. Detroit was 9.5, so we both over with that. Minnesota 8.5. I think we both predicted them to have 9 wins, so we're both barely over. Chicago 7.5. So we're both barely over with 8 and 9 predictions. But Green Bay was 7.5 too. I don't see Green Bay as being as good as Chicago. I think because we don't know what we have in Jordan Love, and that's probably why we are downplaying the Packers' chances this year. I think Fields seems like especially in his 3rd year now, maybe seems like he's a stronger breakout candidate to be a really good player than Jordan Love is. So the Packers were both under the 7.5 for the Packers pretty solidly. And then I guess we move on to the NFC East, which I think is probably the best division of the NFC. The West is all right, but I think the NFC East is a little bit better. I think they had 3 playoff teams last year. And I think we have them finishing exactly the same order that they did last year.
Do we?
I had the Eagles winning the division at 12-5.
Yep. Same here.
I had Dallas in second at 10-7. I had the Giants
Eight
in
second.
third at 8-9, and the Commanders in fourth at 4-13.
So we had same records for Dallas and Philly. I had the Giants. Also with the same. You had 8 for the Giants.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had the same record there too. So I had one more win for Washington than you had.
So you were 12-10.
Or sorry, I was 12-9 for Dallas.
Okay, so I was one more for
Two
Dallas
wins.
and one worse for
Yeah.
what for Washington. So yeah, so for Philadelphia, their over under was 11.5. So we're both slightly over at 12.
Yeah.
Dallas's over under was 9.5. So I ended up going over and you were under. So I think that kind of indicates that the line was probably put at the right place if we're right there. The Giants were over under 7.5, and we both were 8-9 with them, so just barely over. And Washington was 6.5, which seems a little bit high, especially since they don't really have a quarterback either. Sam Howell is the predicted starter, and and it seems like, especially in that division, he's probably the worst of the 4 quarterbacks pretty easily. So I picked, and so I had them at 4-13. You had 5-12. You were a little bit. We had switched Green Bay and Washington. I think I had Washington at 4-13, and you had Green Bay at 4-13. So those are our, and they're both under. So it's under 6.5 there. So
we do have some differences, but they're all fairly minor. No like dramatically different results. I think it's interesting just to see the 2 different strategies for picking out the games, and very close. And I didn't look at the sports book win total numbers before I'd picked out the games in the same way that you did, it seemed like. So
I think that's the way to do. You want to be influenced by it. You want to just kind of come in with a clear idea. What did your playoff picture look like in the NFC?
So I have Philly and the 49ers with the 2 best records in the league. Saints and Lions also winning divisions. Saints being the lowest at 7-10 to make the playoffs, which is kind of amusing. Then I had Dallas. Who else? Oh, Minnesota and Chicago as the 3 wild cards.
That was similar to mine. I had Philadelphia as the 1 seed. I actually had Detroit as the 2 seed at 11-6. I had the 49ers only winning 10. I had the Saints also winning 10, but I can't remember. I think maybe the Saints won the tiebreaker in my little scenario. So I had the Saints as the 3rd seed and the 49ers as the 4th seed. I have Dallas as the 5th seed at 10-7. I had Minnesota as the 6th seed at 9-8. And then I had a 4-way tie for 7th at 8-9. So, and I didn't decide to break. I actually had 2 4-way ties for 7th seeds in each of the conferences. And I didn't end up breaking the tie because that would have been too complicated for me to figure out. I had Seattle at 8-9, the Rams at 8-9, the Bears at 8-9, and the Giants at 8-9. So one of those 4 teams I had as the 7th and final NFC playoff team.
So I had the Rams and Giants also tied with Chicago, but I had them not making it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you had a tiebreaker.
But I didn't go through the actual rules for the tiebreaker. I just decided, how about
I see. Okay. Yeah. You could, it works. It works. You didn't figure out each game, so I would have had to.
I can't go through the tiebreaker mechanism because I don't.
Yeah, I would have had to go.
I didn't pick every
game,
so.
And I forget which way the ties are broken. It's intra division is broken first, and then outside, and then but then it's records among the tied teams, and then conference record, and then I forget. So
eventually it's down coin flip, and it doesn't really matter. Really
points scored, point differential. I think even
common opponents, isn't that?
Yeah. So how confident are you in these in these picks?
As of right now, I am fully confident that all of them are going to be exactly right, Mike. Is that not Once the very first game of the season is played, I think I'll probably tear this up and throw it and burn it.
Mhm. But yeah, it looks a lot like last year. I
Yeah.
think the the teams that are competing for playoff spots this year are essentially, I don't know, usually there's more turnover in the NFL than this, but I guess in the NFC South it was Tampa Bay that won the division, and we have them both of us have Tampa as being non-competitive since Brady is gone and being replaced by Baker
Well,
Mayfield.
really, that last season, that bracket was that whole division was only within one game.
Yeah, it was 8. Yeah, Tampa was 8 and 9, weren't they, when they won?
Atlanta, Carolina, and New Orleans were all 7-10.
Yeah. Um, Green Bay was also pushing for a playoff spot until the last week, and now I think with Rodgers going, I think neither of us think that they're going to be as good. Um, I think the Bears are going to be a little bit better as you. I think the Rams aren't going to be as bad as they were last year.
If we predict correctly, then the Bears would be 5 games better than last season.
Mm-hmm.
We both had Minnesota being 4 games worse than last season, so it seems like the
Minnesota lost, or they won. I think were they 11-0 in like 1-score games or something.
Yeah.
It was they won these coin flip games at a kind of an absurd rate. So you would think they would come back to earth, even if their team is just as good. And you might say, well, the team's not as good because they don't have Dalvin Cook anymore. They have Alexander Madison as their first running back, and maybe some other, so. But I think in Detroit we think it's going to be a little bit better. So yeah, it makes sense. It might be a little bit conventional wisdom what we're picking, but I think most of us are picking maybe more down on Green Bay than maybe the average person might be, and I think maybe a little higher on the Rams than. But the Rams were 2 years removed from winning a Super Bowl. They still have Aaron Donald, if Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford stay healthy, you think their offense is pretty good. And the NFC is not nearly as good. When I went through the records of the AFC versus the NFC, I think the AFC was on, I think total was about 30 games above 500 when you added all their records together, and the NFC was about 30 games under. And since the AFC and NFC play each other 5 times a year, each NFC team plays each AFC team, or each NFC team plays AFC teams 5 times in a season. I think the AFC is the clearly better conference, and that's going to come out, and that's going to affect the records of these teams. So I have the AFC teams as being as having on the whole higher records than higher numbers of wins than the NFC. Do you want to talk about the NFC? I mean the AFC?
Yeah.
Or do we have any other NFC?
Get away from this conference and get to the good one.
Yeah.
Like you just said.
And then of course now we say this, the NFC is going to win the Super Bowl, and they're going to have the best teams, but sometimes you might say, well, the NFC, you could say this is maybe something that people argued with the Eagles, was that, well, the Eagles, when they played the NFC playoffs last year, they started out against the Giants, who were terribly overmatched and played terribly after, maybe they were worn out after beating the Vikings. And then the 49ers didn't even have a quarterback. And so the Eagles made it through their bracket unscathed, basically, because they didn't have to play anybody who was any good.
Yeah.
And the only team that was possibly good was the 49ers, and they were on their 5th string quarterback, which was their injured 3rd string quarterback or a running back playing quarterback for them. And so of course they were fresher and better, and maybe they almost won the Super Bowl, maybe simply because they had a easier path to go through, where the AFC teams were kind of beating up on each other, and the Chiefs were kind of walking wounded when they came out of the AFC playoff race when Mahomes was hurt and things like that. So that I think simply having a better conference does not mean that you're going to win the Super Bowl. However, so but maybe on it, because usually you're only playing one game, anybody can win one game. But I think the AFC, mainly because the quarterbacks are better in the AFC, and because the quarterbacks are better, sometimes there's a kind of an arms race to develop stronger defenses or higher powered offenses to compete with the other higher powered offenses, and so the teams are just maybe a little bit better
Well, then they have to try to find that edge, have to keep
Yeah.
ahead, whatever it is. If it's gadget type plays, or if it's just having the craziest arm basically in the league. Yeah. So we're gonna same order. We're gonna start.
Yeah,
with
we'll start west and then move our way east.
I'm guessing we both have the Chiefs winning the West. The homer choice. I think you already said you had 14 wins.
I have 14 wins for the Chiefs. Yeah,
I had 13-4.
they won 14 last year. 14 or 14-3 last year. So I figured they'd probably be about the same this year. I actually had them losing at Minnesota, at New England, and then at the Chargers in the last game of the year, when I thought maybe the division race would have been wrapped up and maybe they're going to rest some of their players. And this is also maybe when as well the Chargers are challenging for a playoff spot and desperately need a win. And so I thought maybe that game was going to be those last games of the season are hard to predict. So I thought that would be a good spot to lose. I actually have the Chiefs beating because they play, I think the best teams that the Chiefs play this year are all going to be at home. They play the Bills at Arrowhead, they play the Bengals at Arrowhead, and they also play the Eagles at Arrowhead. So I predicted them to go undefeated at home and lose a few games on the road.
Nice.
And I wouldn't be surprised if they won a couple of those road games and lost one or two of the home games to the good teams.
Yeah,
which they seem to do a lot. So
I could see them like not really trying in some of those games against like the Bills and Bengals, just because they don't want to show them anything if they have to face them in the playoffs. They do tend to not necessarily use the full playbook in those games, just to make sure that they have an edge if they meet them again in the playoffs. So I could see them dropping both of those games at home just to not engage.
And they did this. They lost this past season. They lost to Buffalo at home, and they also lost to Cincinnati on the road, and they also lost to in the previous season. They lost to Buffalo at home and Cincinnati on the road. But with Cincinnati, maybe they seem to be playing Buffalo in Arrowhead more frequently. They haven't played in Buffalo since the 2020 season. I don't believe that was the COVID year when they blew out the Bills. That was the weird windy rainy game, I think, and the Chiefs just ran on the Bills that game, and
they hardly threw any passes that one.
Like Mahomes had maybe 180 yards passing or something. It was a little bit like the Mac Jones game the Bills played against the Patriots, where I think Jones had like 2 completions or something like that, and the Patriots still beat the Bills because they just ran. But anyway, so my AFC West, the way it ended up going was I had the Chiefs winning at 14-3. I had Denver at 10-7, a little bit of a surprise, especially given the fact I don't know how good Russell Wilson is, but I think they'll be better. The Broncos, they have a lot of their tough games at home, and I think Mile High Stadium is still whatever field it is at Mile High is still a good home field advantage. I have the Chargers also at 10-7, and I have the Raiders at 7-10 in the basement. How about you?
I had the Chargers also at 10-7. I had Denver flipped 7-10, and I have the Raiders at 6-11, which is another one of those we're straddling the actual over-under number for the Raiders.
Yeah, so for the Chiefs over-under was 11.5, which I think both of us thought was probably a little low because with Mahomes as quarterback, the Chiefs have never won fewer than 12 games, and those 12-5 seasons are typically when either Mahomes is really struggling like he did a couple of years ago, or he was injured for a handful of games and they still were 12-5. So I think
actually those were like 16 game seasons too, so they were
still
so over Chiefs, with a one fewer game, right?
Yeah, so I think the Chiefs they have a tough schedule, but I think they'll win more than 11. Denver's over under is 8.5. So I had them over, you had them under. And the Chargers is 9.5. We each have them just over with 10 wins. And then Las Vegas is 6.5. I have them as 7, so I have them over. and you have them under. So I have all 4 AFC West teams as being over.
Mm-hmm.
You have 2 and 2.
2 under, yeah. Yep.
I hope with the AFC South. I think we both believe the AFC South is a 2-team race.
Mm-hmm. So Jacksonville, Tennessee. I have them tied at the top. I have Houston, Indy tied at the bottom, actually. So I have Jacksonville, Tennessee each with 10 wins. Houston, Indy each with 5.
I had them even a little bit more polarized than that. I had Tennessee with 11 wins. I had Jacksonville with 11 wins. I had Tennessee winning the division on my tiebreaker thing. I had Indianapolis at 4 and 13. I actually have Houston at 2 and 15.
Ooh.
I don't think they'll be very good. They have a little tougher schedule, I think. And
Actually worse than their 2022 season.
yeah, and I actually have them well, I have them, one of the games that would kind of change it is with Arizona. I have Arizona winning at Houston kind of later in the year, but also partly I just don't think Houston is going to be very good, and they're playing in the AFC, so they have a tougher road to hoe than the NFC teams, and just the way I ended up being.
A lot
I
of
didn't
turnover though with Houston too. Like we don't really know.
Yeah, we don't know who they are. What
anything about them? New general manager, new coach, a lot of new players, a lot of new draft picks that just came in. They're a very new team.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how they play.
Yeah, I can see.
I think they might bounce back a little bit. It seems like
I could see them winning a few more games.
Way down.
But the over-unders are odd, I think, for the South. So Tennessee's over-under is 7.5. And so you have them at 10. I have them at 11. So we both have them, each of them way over. And I think because they were 8 and 9 last year, 7 and 10 last year with basically no quarterback and no big threat receiver. And so when Tannehill was hurt and DeAndre Hopkins was not there and A.J. Brown had gone to Philadelphia, and so this year, and
wasn't Derrick Henry hurt too?
Derrick Henry was hurt some. Traylon Burks, their number 1 pick, was hurt. It's like most of their players were hurt, and Tannehill, when he's actually playing, makes that team very formidable. And they were the number 1 seed just 2 years ago with essentially the same team. So I think I don't think Tennessee is a Super Bowl contender exactly, but I think they're one of the top 5 or so teams in the AFC. And so I had them at 11 and 6, so way over 7.5. Jacksonville was 9.5. I think people think Jacksonville's going to maybe walk all over the division. I think that's ignoring that Tennessee still has good players on Tennessee, and they have a very strong defense. The Titans, maybe the strongest defense in that division. So I had the Jaguars at 11 and 6. You had them at 10 and 7.
So it's interesting. Yeah, we both had them tied for the division lead with just 1 game different, between the two of us. But you had Tennessee winning. I have Jacksonville winning though too. So that's
okay.
It may play a factor in playoffs at least anyway.
So just over for each of us. Yes, with Jacksonville. Indianapolis and Houston were each 6.5 the over under. Both of us are pretty well under 6.5. I have them. Well, I have Indianapolis and Houston together only winning 6 games. So that's pretty far under. Yours are 5 and 12 for each.
Yeah.
So, but still,
but it ends up being 2 under, 2 over for
2 under, 2 over.
So our bets on this one will be a wash on the AFC South, no matter what the outcome is. You and I will tie. So there's no advantage to be had there between you and I.
No advantage. Maybe perhaps there will be in the AFC North. How did you see the AFC North shaking up?
So I have Cincinnati winning the division at 12 and 5. I have Baltimore coming in second at 10 and 7. Cleveland slipping a bit from last season to 6 and 11. And Pittsburgh giving Mike Tomlin their first losing season, I believe, under his tenure, 5 and 12. Not high on Kenny Pickett as you may be.
Yeah, this is where this is probably the division where we're the most different on, I think, at least in the AFC for sure. So I had Cincinnati also at 12-5 winning the division. I have Pittsburgh at second at 11-6. Then I have Baltimore at 10-7. I think that's the same record you had for Baltimore, 10-7. And then I had Cleveland at 9-8. So I actually have each of the four teams with a winning record in that division, which is unusual. But I think given the fact that I think that the NFC is so weak, I think some of those AFC teams or some of those AFC divisions can have three or more teams with winning records, maybe even four, like the AFC North. So I have Cincinnati, then Pittsburgh, then Baltimore, then Cleveland, 12, 11, 10, and then 9 wins.
For betting, we're only going to be off by one here. We have 3 of them are the same and one is different. So
yeah, Cincinnati was 11.5 was the over under. And so we each had them go 12-5. So they're just over.
Yeah.
Baltimore was 10.5. And we had each of them each of us had Baltimore 10-7. So each was just barely under. Cleveland was 9.5 was the over under. I had Cleveland at 9-8, so just under, and you had Cleveland at
6-11.
6-11, so well under.
Well under, yes.
And then the polarizing one was Pittsburgh over under 8.5. I had them at 11, so quite a bit over, and you had them at
Way
5
under.
wins, well under. So Kenny Pickett, I think you mentioned, I don't know if this was before we went on the air or not, was it a perfect passer rating in the preseason? And he's
for the collective preseason.
And I think TJ Watt coming back is going to make the team better. They were just over 500 last year with basically no good quarterback play. And so Pickett can play fairly well, which I think he maybe can. Maybe because I'm closer to Pittsburgh, maybe I'm just becoming more of a Pittsburgh homer, thanks to my proximity to Acrisure Stadium. I won't call it Acrisure Stadium in front of Pittsburgh fans because will always be Heinz Field to them, or Three Rivers Stadium. Maybe I can call it New Three Rivers. And
New Three Rivers.
Yeah,
rivers are new.
No, the new stadium at Three Rivers or something we would call it.
Okay.
We yes. So that was the AFC North. Now, last but not least is the AFC East. How did you see that shaking out?
I have Buffalo winning the division at equal to the Chiefs record at 13-4. I have Miami second at 10-7. The Jets just behind that, 9-8. Pats pulling up the rear, 6-11.
Okay. We were very similar. We were similar, but just a little bit off of each other on this one as well. So I had Buffalo winning. I had them at 12-5. So a little one win less than you have them. I actually had Miami and New York Jets reversed. I think that, going in, I thought, well, Miami, I think, is a better team than the Jets. But I think Miami's schedule is going to be a little bit harder than the Jets because Miami finished in second place last year in the East, and the Jets finished in third place last year in the East. I think maybe it was fourth even. I think they finished third, but the
Jets were last in
they were fourth. Okay,
7 wins.
They had 7. Okay,
and New England 8 last season.
Yeah. So and so the Jets last year. So one of the games that the Miami will play against the AFC South, they each play one team. The Miami against the AFC South will play, I believe, Tennessee at home, and I think Tennessee is a much tougher game than the Jets AFC South game, which is going to be Houston. So the Miami gets Tennessee at home.
Yeah, and one gets 1, 2 gets 2.
Right? Yeah. So the Jets get Houston at home, and so I think the game with hosting Houston is much easier than the game hosting Tennessee, and I think It's later
That's
in
what we
the
think now.
season.
We don't know. Maybe
I don't
Houston
know, but I think that's my difference between the two of them.
no.
If the Jets were playing Tennessee and the Miami was playing Houston, I'd have that record switched. So I have them pretty close. But I think Tennessee's going to be pretty good. And I think Houston's going to be pretty bad. So the Jets at 10-7, Miami at 9-8, and then I have New England also in last. But I had them at 8-9. This was actually before they got rid of Bailey Zappi when I made this. So now I maybe think of them a little bit worse than that. But maybe Zappi will come back and play well. I am maybe
Would you still have the Patriots beating the Chiefs? Because you might have assumed that they were going to be with Zappy, not.
Yeah, I don't know.
Devils.
Yeah, that's a good question. I tend to think though, I was just thinking, well, Belichick always plays the Chiefs tough, and it's at New England. Maybe the Chiefs have a big lead in the AFC. It's not the biggest, most important game. It's later in the season. Maybe there's some injuries, and so I was thinking, well, maybe this is where the Patriots can steal one. But who knows? Yeah, if it's, I don't really see how Mac Jones matches up well with Patrick Mahomes. But by that point, I just think the team, usually the Chiefs will lose a game, or most good teams will lose a game that you don't think they were going to lose. And last year, the Chiefs lost at Indianapolis, and Indianapolis ended up being one of the worst teams. They weren't yet probably in the shambles that they would become, but because they still had Matt Ryan and they still had Jonathan Taylor healthy and stuff like that. But it became obvious maybe that the Colts were not going to be as good as people thought the Colts were going to be. But and people, that was a head scratching loss, especially looking back. And it required some Sky Moore fumbles, Chris Jones's game-ending sack taken off the board because he said something mean, perhaps to Matt Ryan. There were all these little weird things that happened where some made the Chiefs lose by just a little bit. So those things can happen on the road, and who knows. But yeah, so I had Buffalo first, New England last. We were right, and then we had the Jets and Miami flip-flopped. Buffalo's over under was 10.5 wins. So we each went over there.
Comfortably over. More than one game.
Yes. And now the Jets and Miami is where we get interesting because they were each over or under 9.5 wins. So you had over on Miami, right? Or you 9-8 with Miami?
I was 10-7 with Miami. So I'm
10-7 with Miami. So you were over with Miami.
We're both over with Miami. I think Miami's 8.5. Is that right?
I saw them at 9.5 when I did mine.
Oh, it is 9.5. I did not catch that one. It is 9.5. So yes. So we have 3 differences in the AFC East. This will be the pivotal race to determine the record for you versus me.
Because that one win, 10-7 versus 9-8, was all the difference. So I had the Jets with 10 wins, so I had them over 9.5. You had the Jets with 9 wins, so you had them under 9.5.
Yes.
You had the Dolphins with 10 wins, so they're over 9.5 for you. I had the Dolphins with 9 wins, so they're under 9.5 for me.
That's right.
And then we had New England. I had New England with 8 wins, so they're over 7.5. You had them with 6, so they're under for you. So yeah.
3 differences between you and I in that. I mean, the records are very close to each other.
Yeah, and this is why I think Las Vegas usually picks the right number for these teams, or very often does. And it's tough to say, well, I think they'll be, they're going to be a 9-8 or an 8-9 team, or a 10-7 or a 9-8 team. It's hard to decide, especially going in. So this is where they make their money. And I'm a little concerned that I picked so many overs, but it's usually the sucker bet. But maybe,
well, some teams are going to win a lot of games. Some teams are going to lose a lot of games, and it's just all about the middle, right?
How did your AFC playoff picture shake up?
So I think we had 3 of the division winners were the same: Buffalo, Cincinnati, Kansas City. You and I differed on the South. We had them tied, but you had Tennessee winning the tiebreaker. I have Jacksonville.
Yeah.
For me, that meant Tennessee is actually out of the playoffs entirely. And so I have the Chargers, Baltimore, and Miami being the three wild card representatives from the AFC,
at 10-7.
all at 10-7. Yeah.
Yeah, I had 10-7 teams also missing the playoffs. I had the Chiefs at the first seed. I had them at 14. Then I had the Bengals, Bills, each with 12. And it ended up being reversed from last year. I had the Bengals as number 2, the Bills as number 3. And then I had the Titans with 11 wins, edging out the Jacksonville Jaguars for their division. So Tennessee ended up with a 4th seed. Pittsburgh also had 11 wins, so I ended up having Pittsburgh at the 5 seed and Jacksonville as the 6. And then I had 4 teams with 10-7 records, so I didn't end up breaking those ties. So I had the Broncos, the Chargers, the Ravens, and the Jets all at 10-7. And so one of those 4 teams,
Only one of those teams would make it. If you just had to throw a team out there, who would you throw out there?
I'd say one of the Wests, the Chargers, maybe. I would have them.
Yeah, because they could. Man, that would be really tough to break that tie though.
Or possibly, well, the Ravens or the Jets too. I don't know. I also had Cleveland at 9-8 and Miami at 9-8. So like I have 5 teams in the AFC with winning records that did not make the playoffs. And
how many losing record teams did you have in the NFC?
I just had 1 losing record, but I had 4, 8, and 9 teams vying for the 7th spot. So yeah, I had
actually had 2 losing record teams in the last division. The last
it's I think it just shows that we each think that the NFC is the weaker conference and the AFC is the stronger one. But there's the little nuances between the differences between our 2 picks are I think going to be interesting as to see what happens as the season goes along, especially as the over-unders. We didn't make really bets on the playoffs or anything like that, but I think since because we're big homers, we probably think the Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl. But I don't think that's a dumb bet, but I think it's something that I wouldn't bet on simply because the odds aren't probably very good, and it's made more of the heart than the head. But I think in general, the over-unders, I think we tried to be fairly scientific. Hopefully we will get more of those right, each get more of those right than we get wrong.
So next week we'll start our betting on the regular games. Are we going to do the same thing? 3? We're going to do pick 3.
We will. I think we'll pick 3 bets to make each week, our most confident bets. But then I think maybe just to kind of measure ourselves, we can pick over-unders and spreads for all of the games, and we can kind of see, well, how well do we do overall? Do we do better or worse when we actually have to, be confident in these picks? Or do we say, well, maybe we should only be confident and not pick every game because we'll do better on the ones we actually think will be right. Yeah, so something like that. This is just really about compiling data, I think, at this point for us.
Should we be professional bettors? That is the question we're trying to answer for ourselves.
Yes. Should we move to
again as a disclaimer? We're not actually making these bets though right now. These are all theoretical.
Yes, this is something that we need to decide before we.
And neither are we recommending anyone bet on these things. That I'm using our discussion here as evidence as to why you should or shouldn't do anything.
I think if anything, we should become professional preseason bettors, because that's
our very simplistic model worked quite well.
Yeah, but just looking at the over-unders of week 1 of the NFL, they're much, much higher than the preseason games were. So I think there's not that advantage to be had there. And if anything, I would go blanket under rather than blanket over if I had to do a blanket one. But I don't want to do either of those. I would do each one individually, which is a lot more work and a lot more.
It does take more effort.
Should we wrap up this week's episode of our esteemed program? This has been a much shortened version compared to recent weeks of WTPH, but it doesn't mean we aren't as enthusiastic this week as we were the last couple of weeks. We just had more material to go through, and we're both very excited for football season. As one of our listeners told me, we were supposed to, we should say football is soon approaching. Yay! That was the line I was given.
I was surprised that it did not include a go football. That's
Go
it.
football. Yeah, we have a. Well, I don't know if you know which listener that is, but anyway.
I'm pretty sure I do,
but it could be one of millions, Dr. Scaff. It's hard to say, since we were such a popular program here on the various podcast channels and on YouTube. So, but anyway, we will talk about more of our popularity and more of our wonderful betting prowess next week when we make our initial season in-season bets for week 1. We have a whole 10 or so days to kind of bask in the afterglow of the preseason and the cut downs, and maybe some of these rosters are going to get shifted and shaken up a little bit. You at least hope some of them will. If you're a Patriots fan, you do want a second quarterback on that roster. You also are hoping maybe if you're a fan of one of the teams that didn't do terribly well last year, that maybe you'll be able to pick up some of the cast-offs from some other team and insert them into your team and have them maybe even be a starter or a main contributor as the year goes on. So while you're thinking about that, I shall remain Dr. Michael Orman. He shall remain Dr. Andrew Scaff. We shall remain the Warning Track Power Hour. Please like and or subscribe to our YouTube channel or our various podcast delivery systems. And do we have anything else to say before we close, Dr. Scaff?
I think so.
Since we have nothing else to say, we bid you good day.
Will Carson Wentz be on a roster by the time our next episode comes on?
Possibly.
Is
that definitive enough?
Yeah.
You can cut that in if you want.
Confident non-answer. Yeah.
Don't want to rule anything out.